Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Golden Rule Revolution. My name's Lucas Mack, and this podcast is all about treating people like people and nothing less. And today, I'm very honored to bring a veteran on, Christian Armstrong, who has an Instagram account that we connected on over Instagram. And my brother who hosts a podcast called The Soulful Hunter had him on. Christian's a hunter, a father, a husband, and a veteran. And he shares in this episode his journey of facing the darkness and trauma to finding the light and love that he was searching for. This is a beautiful episode. Christian, I'm so honored that you joined. Thank you again for your service, not only while you served in the military uniform, but also your service to bringing the message of fathers and husbands leading with love. I hope you enjoyed this episode. With that, I'm honored to have Christian join me. Christian, how you doing, brother?
Good, man. I wish we would have got the first portion of our conversation.
I know.
We had some gold in there, but this is going to have to be like a 3-4 version series, maybe.
Totally. I love it. Let's do it. Let's rock it. I was thinking, have you ever read the book Pilgrim's Progress?
I haven't. But I'm getting a lot of good references from you, so I'm going to be taking notes because you've already given me a couple.
Oh my gosh, you got to read the book Pilgrim's Progress. For anyone listening, Pilgrim's Progress, and I'm looking, Pilgrim's Progress is a Christian classic that was written. Let me grab it. Let me see. Here it is. The actual title is The Pilgrim's Progress. Now, The Pilgrim's Progress was written by a guy named John Bunyan. John Bunyan was jailed in London for all sorts of stuff, one of which was preaching the Bible at a time when it wasn't legal to preach outside of the Anglican Church. And while he was jailed, he wrote this book called The Pilgrim's Progress. And your name, the main character's name is Christian. So that's why I'm asking if you read it. It's a book. And it's just this whole journey about, it's an allegory of life where Christian, the main character of the book, comes and confusion comes and meets him along the road and offers them an easier way. And all these characters with names, metaphors, and it's powerful. So here you are, Christian, on your own journey in life, on your own path. So I'm honored to have you on, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I really do.
So first of all, how was it being on my brother's podcast? He's such a stud.
He is, dude. He's probably got one of the biggest hearts of anybody I've ever met. I always think back, during the time when we were talking about when we had the twins and we were going through our stuff, Johnny was consistently one of the most regular people to check on me and just be like, love you, dude. I hope you're hanging in and praying for you. Like, just a genuine, selfless man. And like, he's totally the kind of people that I'm encouraged to connect with, to create community with. And it's like, that's the power of the social media thing. It's like how you and I are doing now. Yeah. The ability to be able to connect with such strong-minded and big-hearted people is like absolute blessing. And so, I mean, it was a blast. It was awesome being able to get on a show with him and talk about, stuff with substance. Having conversations like that is golden. Dude,
it's so good. And isn't it interesting, in this world where there's 320 million Americans, it seems like everyone's on social media, and if you got to take a break with the kids, I know.
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay, no worries, man, because mine will pop in once in a while too. But, with so many people online, it's hard sometimes to feel like there's those like-minded individuals, that you can rap and talk with. And
it's crazy. It is crazy because, I mean, and there's certain systems that social media uses, but how many times like you feel like a minority in whatever kind of whatever kind of community that you get tied in, because they'll throw you out to try and get you into things that interest you, whether it be, marketing companies, other people. But sometimes you like read stuff, you're like, gosh, am I like the only one that believes the things I believe? But then like you start picking up on it. And then when you find that gem of a person that you just hit with, you're like, dude, yes, made it.
Totally. And it's interesting. I mean, one of the things that we don't hear too much about anymore is being a father in our generation. And how old are you?
I'm almost 30.
Almost 30. So, bro,
Yeah.
you're young. You're a young buck in this game.
I'm a young buck, dude. To have the amount of kids and the life experience I do, I'm young.
Which is
I,
beautiful.
and it's funny because it's something I always prayed for. I've always, I've always been wise beyond my years. And as a younger man, it really troubled me because I always thought I was bigger than I was. And God bless my oldest son. He's the same way. But I look at myself now, and it's like I was telling Johnny one time. It's like I feel like most of my friends and people I associate with are over the age of 50. But that's also because I honestly find the most wisdom in genuine interaction with men from that generation. Like my pops, who's 64, 65 now.
Wow.
Like I grew up with the comfort of him showing me the value and integrity and accountability and hard work, and it's just how that's gone by the wayside. I cling to it with like my dear life now. So when I find guys with character that value that, or some of them weren't even raised that way, it's just like, there's guys like you that are just built like that. They get it. They have a passion for leadership, but also wisdom. And so you have a passion for being a student and a leader, that's hard to come by, because either people just want to learn everything and they don't want to take any initiative, or you got people that want to become only, leaders only, and they have,
right.
They like to talk. They like the sound of their voice. They think they've got it figured out. So finding that middle line of people that are humble enough, but also instigate work first. Those are genuine people that I love connecting with.
It is. I've built probably, except for a few exceptions, guys that I've been friends with for a while, but some of my closest friends I've met through. So I've never actually met, I've never been in physical presence to them, but I talk to guys, I Zoom with guys all the time. I've done, summits with guys, and all through this digital world. And I think, as we're talking about generations, I got off a call earlier with a guy that's in his mid to late 60s. And he was talking about that this generation of baby boomers has failed the following, generations that followed, because they didn't steward well. And, some, like, thankfully you got that stewardship. But what I said to him is, it doesn't matter what's come before us. That's blame. That's victimhood. That's, this happened to me. Look, we all can share stories of terrible things that have happened to us, but I'm seeing men and women be raised up right now of all colors, creeds, cultures, places around the world that are rising up and saying, the pain stops with me.
Mm-hmm.
The pain stops with me. I'm not going to pass it on any longer. I'm going to do the inner work. I'm going to face what I need to face. I'm going to have the courage to step through those areas that have been taboo or just scary, scary. And guys, especially like alpha male men, don't usually talk emotional stuff because it's not perceived as manly. However, it's what every guy really wants, is just to be told, hey, you're okay. Let's, just want to be.
And ironically too, like the thing that is so misconstrued about alpha males is they don't talk, period. Every true alpha male I've ever met, they don't boast. And especially spending time in the military, you come across quite a bit of alpha males.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they're undervalued, and they don't stick around long because they are undervalued and they're taken advantage of. Alpha males truly act on behalf of others before themselves, and they act in a way that makes everybody around them better. Betas are the ones that get off, they're often the ones that get labeled as alphas. They're the ones that talk a lot. They like to show. They like they believe that they are the strength, and they have no problem showcasing it. And that leads to so much downplay to those beneath them or those that look up to them, thinking, oh man, this guy's got it figured out. And that's what I figured out at a young age, probably because my dad was a great role model for me. But I watch him, and like one of the things I remember as a kid is like he'd take me to get donuts on Saturday mornings after basketball. And every time we went, I remember him stopping and giving a homeless man a couple bucks, and like, whether it be a sweatshirt that he had in his truck, like, and he knew, he's like, that guy might not, he might have the wrong intentions, but it's the matter of principle of what are you doing? What if that 27th time that you go give him $5, it finally clicks with him, like, this dude has been consistently helping me. Maybe I am better than what I believe I am.
Mm.
And, one good little gracious movement here and there, sure, it's better than none, but what are you consistently doing to show up and improve upon your character to help others believe that they are better too? And
Mm.
that's one thing that I've learned is key with being an alpha is it's the selfless, it's being selfless. That's the biggest portion of it that is so misconstrued now. And I hate it because I like watch my kids, and I think it's normal growing up. You see athletes, you see entertainers, wrestlers growing up. When I was a kid, you see the guys that were like the biggest, baddest, tallest, loudest. They were the strongest ones,
Right.
which is so not true. And it's like Frank Lucas said, the loudest one in the wind, the loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room.
That's right.
Couldn't be more true. And
Sure.
and you watch it play out in society right now. That's most of the leaders, and I hate saying leaders, but they have been put it on a pedestal as leaders because they've sold everybody that they are. They had a marketing tactic to make people believe that they were the alpha. They were the one that was fit for the position of being leadership.
Right.
And it's become less about showing. And if you can sell it, you got it.
Right. That's a good point. My buddy, one of my really good friends, medically retired. I talk about him all the time. He's made such a big impact in my life. In fact, I really would not be here to this day had it not been for him stepping into my life and talking about opportunities he did to heal. But he was a 10-year medically retired Navy SEAL. And he said whenever he'd go to bars as a SEAL, most of the SEALs, they like to have fun, but they'd sit back, and two things he would look at. He would look at a guy's shoes and he'll look at the guy's hands. And if the guy was talking a lot and had laced up shoes, he knew the guy probably was able to back it up. But if the guy was talking a lot and had slip-ons or, flip-flops or whatever, it's like, and too often guys that are running their mouth had flip-flops or, silly. So that just makes me laugh. But tell me your story, man. Share your story growing up and what got you to where you are right now.
Oh gosh, man. I mean, I'm the farthest thing from self-made. When it comes down to the cloth I was cut from, I was born to my mom and biological father in 91. They were actually a college couple. I was not planned. And I have a good relationship with my father, but he lives in California. He's remarried. My mom remarried when I was I think I was about 5 years old. And my stepdad came into my life. I maintained a good relationship with my father, but my stepdad, he stepped in and raised me, taught me the values, everything I am. I really, and that's not to downplay what my dad, my biological father is, but when my stepdad came in, I hate even calling him stepdad because I feel like it's a disgrace to his role in my life, but he was just one of the most honorable men that I've ever had, the absolute blessing to know. And had a great childhood, was always well off. I never had to struggle for nothing. My parents, taught me the value of earning everything that I get. Was pretty typical. Grew up playing sports, going to church on Sundays. But I took quite a turn once I hit my prepubescent years, probably around 13. I started, like I said, I thought I was wise beyond my years. I wanted to figure out everything on my own. Pretty typical, but I took it to an extreme. I ended up dropping out of high school when I was 16. Getting a full-time job and moving out. So like, I was like what they call a rare breed rebel. Like I was the one that was willing to go like earn my keep, but like still wanted to do things my way. So I was working at Subway and I ended up like getting a manager position. I was working 40 hours a week. I had enough money to, support myself, but I was obviously with a bad crowd. I was usually hanging out with college kids. I shared an apartment with like 3 of my buddies who were all college age, I think like 20, 21. I'm like 16.
Wow.
And so that led into me having my first child when I was 18, who my son is obviously now 11 years old. And that was like the biggest pivot point in my life, because at that point, like I didn't clean up my act right away, but I knew I had to change something. And at that age, I was like, okay, so I've been hustling, doing this crap, like working at Subway isn't going to provide, health insurance. It's not going to give me the life I need to provide for a child. So I always in the back of my mind, especially growing up in the era of 9/11, was like, I had this call, a call to duty for my country. And so I was like, man, this is the opportunity. Like, this is kind of what I've always thought I was going to be built to do. And so I enlisted in the military at 18 years old. Wow. Shipped out, I think when my son was maybe 6 months old, he was about 6 months old. So I left for basic training. was gone for 4 months. And like, one of the things I really talk about was the shift I made, and the indoctrination of becoming, a military member. And it was, I don't hear a lot of people talk about it, and I know it's changed a lot now, but when I went through, the guys that were training me, a lot of my drill sergeants were the guys that were on the, they were the ones that went through the initial push. These were guys that were 18 years old that were in Fallujah. When you saw those night cams rolling, and just the 48-hour firefights where guys were pinned down for days without food, no support.
Right.
These were the dudes that brought me in, and they were so broken and they were so weathered that it was a complete culture shock, and they build it that way. But it was more than I think a lot of people bargained for, to the point that within the first 48 hours, we had six boys in my platoon alone that tried to commit suicide, just on the indoctrination. I mean, it's, and I don't go into details about what it is, but they absolutely break you at a spiritual level. They do something to you to make you completely forfeit who you thought you were before you got there, and build off of that. And they instill anger, and they instill grit, and they instill almost a resistance to so much, to any form of pain. So they combine physical, mental, and spiritual pain all at once, so that it just becomes a whitewash, that you learn how to turn off this switch, but it's almost becomes intermittent. So everything will be great, all of a sudden snap. And they teach you that over the course of these 6 months of doing this stuff over and over again. And I remember the first time I saw my son on a family day, this was probably one of the hard, it's ingrained into my brain, but I remember seeing my son across the room. And this was something that they did about, I think 3.5 months in, they let you have a break for like 3 days to go see your family. And I saw my son, my mom, and my wife at the time, my son's mother. And I didn't feel anything. I remember seeing them, and I was so jacked up. I'm like, oh man, I finally get to see my family. And then it's like, when I finally saw them, it was like this, like, there's no joy, there's no excitement. I couldn't smile. And then that in turn made me so angry. I was like, and I could tell they were like, what's going on? And it was like this, I couldn't turn the switch back on anymore. I didn't know how to have feelings. I didn't know how to have empathy. And I remember spending the weekend with them, just trying, but it was like, I was like this chaotic ball of testosterone. Like, it was all I wanted was chaos anymore. And it was all I felt comfortable with. And so I went back and finished up, obviously, my initial training, which, like, boot camp's boot camp. But back at that time when I joined, it was a lot more serious than it is taken now. And I think that's because there was a need then to cultivate types of soldiers that could weather the storm that was created in the warfare that we had going on. Especially just because of the generation that was teaching us and that was drilling us and doing all the stuff that we were doing. Those dudes were in one of the worst wars in American history, outside of Vietnam, World War I, World War II. Like, OIF, OEF were horrible, and we were never winning those wars. Right. And so that's kind of what they taught us, is that just to get comfortable being uncomfortable constantly. And anyways, all that came to a close, and I came home, moved my wife and son out to Colorado to my first duty station. Beautiful Colorado Springs. It was like a dream unit. It's like where everybody wanted to go. It was absolutely beautiful out there. And I served my 4 years. I ended up separating with my wife probably a year in, because I changed. Yeah. I fell down the darkest hole that I had ever been in. And that's coming from, in my teenage years, going down some pretty dark roads, where I was lucky that I wasn't dead or in prison. Getting into drugs, certain just terrible things at a younger age. This made that all look, right, G-rated compared to the type of person that I became after I joined the military. And a lot of it was coping mechanisms, but it was also like, they tailor you that way for a reason, Yeah. And I was a combat arms, my MOS, I was a scout. So, I mean, it was essentially the same thing as infantry, except we did reconnaissance. And so, drinking, fighting, it was kind of like what they teach you is like best for you. And especially you're already at that age, 19, 20, 21 years old. Like, those are the years, your peak testosterone levels, and you're just ready to go. And so, I mean, I really hit rock bottom at that point. My wife at that time, we separated. She took my son home, and that's kind of when I lost it. And spiritually, that was the darkest time in my life. And I remember specifically there being a night where like I said, I'd always been raised in church, but I had never established a personal relationship with Christ. I just kind of curtailed what my parents had developed.
Yeah.
I believed in God. I knew he was real, but never took the initiative to actually seek what a relationship with Christ would be like.
Mm.
And I remember being in my apartment at that time. And I think I had maybe a year and a half left in my service. And all this stuff's going on. I'm in the middle of a divorce. I lost my son, haven't seen him. I'd never get to see him. FaceTime calls were about all we got.
Right.
And I remember it being like 1 a.m, and I'm sitting in my apartment. And all I had was like a Tupperware table or a Rubbermaid little thing that I had for a dining table, a couch, a TV, and my bed. And there was nothing in it, no tables, nothing like that. Mm. And my mattress was on the floor. I had no furniture in my room. And I just remember sitting there that night, and I felt this weight on my chest. And I remember just feeling completely consumed, like the devil's taking me, like he is trying to make this a surefire consumption of my soul. And I literally felt it. And at that point, I remember standing up and just getting on my knees, and I came to tears, and I said, no, I belong to Christ. And I don't know what made me do that, because I hadn't developed a relationship with Christ yet, but I knew that I had to overcome this in order to become better than what I was being. Mm. And it was like, I tell this story to people just because I feel like it's a true testimony of what God can do. But I remember after saying that verbally out loud, the room started glowing. I mean, there was just like this yellow aura around the room, and I got this comfort and this feeling, and the pressure and pain went away. And it was like this complete rebirth in the flesh. I physically felt the weight lift off my shoulders, and this comfort and security of, you're going to be okay. And at that point forward, like my life started to rebuild. Within a few short months, I met who is my wife now, who was going through a very similar process in her life, some very, very dark times, who also was coming to Christ in the same way. And our lives had been paralleled the entire way. And so as I'm kind of being escorted on my way out of the military the last year or so, we developed a great friendship. We kind of grew up in the same circles. And so when I got home, I had another hard time transitioning, just because it was still that same thing of, I came home, got my son, I got us a place, I was raising him, I went to college, used my GI Bill to get a criminal justice degree. Awesome. I was trying to get on with some police departments, and that whole time, me and my wife had established a really good relationship, and then we started dating. And so we had been good friends for about 1.5 years, 2 years before we started dating. And then from there, once we met, it was just, that's when our life kind of unfolded. We ended up getting our first place together. She had a son from a previous relationship. I had my son, and we became a family. I've raised, I consider my son, but I've raised her son since he was like a year old. Wow. And then, life kind of picked up from there. I ended up getting into the electrical apprenticeship, became an electrician about 6 years ago. And then up until this last year, we bought our house 2 years after we got married. We've been married almost 5 years now. And then we had the twins last year, and that's probably like one of the greatest testimonies of our faith ever. The Lord's work. That was, that's a long-winded story to go on top, but most people that have heard of me have heard about my twins. And that's probably one of my favorite things to attest my faith to, and to really describe the mercy and love of God is from the gift that he gave us through them. So I know we had talked about that briefly, and I've talked about it with Johnny, and people may have heard that show, but both my twins I want to say they had less than a 10% survival rate from the time that we found out that we were having twins to, I think it was like within 6 weeks of that, they discovered that they had twin to twin, which is where they share a placenta, but one is severely lacking fluid, and it's severely lacking nutrients. And so it essentially becomes a donor. And one of the boys was feeding all his nutrients and blood flow to the other baby. So what it creates is an oversupply of blood to one baby and a lack of baby. Like essentially one of my boys was shrink wrapped in his amniotic sac. And so we had to go up to Washington, see specialists, and they kept talking about, well, if we do the surgery, it's probably going to be a chance that you'll need to deliver one baby. And this entire time I've never spent as much time in prayer, which is something that I always have a hard time dealing with, because it should never be just the hard times that we pray that hard. But just, naturally that's just how we are as human beings. We grip the word, and we cling to the Lord when things get tough. And that time tested my faith on such an extreme level. I've never been as exhausted. I've never been as scared as I was during those months. But she ended up delivering, I want to say like 29 weeks, her water broke. And after all this stuff that we've been going through, she had to get amnio reductions. I mean, they were removing fluid from her, from the amniotic sacs in the children. That means actually putting a needle through her stomach, removing the fluid 3 different times. And so you're talking, I mean, it was just, we were in the doctor's office every other day. And on top of finances being outstanding, I mean, we're talking probably $1 million just during the pre-pregnancy, during the pregnancy. And then right before we delivered, I think it was just an outstanding, it was like $750,000 in bills that we'd already accrued just from seeing specialists and all this other stuff. And then her water breaks at 29 weeks and we're like, this is never going to get better. And so she ended up delivering them, had to. One was born 2 pounds, one was 4 pounds. And I remember seeing the first one, and he's still a little, he was the donor. But I could fit him in the palm of my hand. I remember when I saw him, it just shook my world. It completely made me feel like the smallest thing on earth. And even though it was for a few seconds, I just remember seeing them. And at that age, when they're born that young, they can't breathe on their own and they can't see. Their eyes and their lungs haven't fully developed. And so my wife had to obviously have an emergency C-section. So she's kind of out it. So I'm running back and forth, trying to watch them supply oxygen to the babies, make sure she's okay, running back and forth. And then after that point, both the boys one spent 69 days in the NICU. The other one was 78. I can't remember exactly, but he was there for a week and a half or 2 weeks more. And that time, if we weren't tested enough in the pregnancy, watching how many people walked out of there without their child was spiritually one of the greatest tests that we've had. Because I mean, you're talking about people that went through the same circumstances, fought that whole way, and then their baby just couldn't fight. They just didn't have the fight anymore. They didn't have the resources to make it. And at that point, I can't say that there was any better ground for me and my wife to forge the marriage that we have now. Yeah. It was something that bonded us in a way that it was unfortunate, but it was also one of the biggest blessings that we've been given to our family, even with our older boys. It just, the way that they were given to us and they were brought into this world was so humbling. It was so graceful, but it makes you count your blessings, and it makes you, it sounds weird. It sounds like I don't value my other children, but it makes you realize how much you overlook how precious a child's life is. And especially the woman that carries them, everything that they have to endure to get through that point. Mm. And so, I mean, here we are, twins are 10 months old and teething and chaos. And now it's just nothing but screaming and poopy diapers in my house. So it all led to the happy ending that we know is just, family, building the foundation of family, a generation of men that I hope to raise as great as my father, did with me.
4 boys.
Four boys.
First of all, thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I honor you sharing that story. And there's a lot of things that came to mind while you're sharing. There's the story of your faith. There's you said, you hate that it is that way, that you pray harder when times, cling to God, cling to the Lord when times are hard. You said a lot, but one of the things I just want to share with you is that there are so many fathers out there that were a vessel to bring life, but they weren't a father. Mm-hmm. And you got to witness that precious and tender moment of bringing the life in, but you also got to see people not be able to keep it of no fault of their own, but walk out of that. And I think just listening to you and just getting back to what we were talking about before we recorded is we get to be fathers that encourage other men to be fathers again. And Amen. I could cry right now, actually, just hearing your story, brother. It's just, if men heal, I believe this with every fiber of my being. When men heal, the world heals. Mm-hmm. I believe men are the origin of pain in this world, either by abstaining from being present or actually inflicting intentionally pain upon another. And that could be their children, that could be to women, that could be whatever. But I think, when the story of Adam and Eve, when, the serpent comes to Eve first and says, are you sure God said that? You're not surely going to die. God just knows that you eat thereof, your eyes should be open. You should be like God. So he gives it to Eve and gives Eve the fruit, and Eve's eyes are open. She gives it to her husband and his eyes are open. But one thing that always strikes me is that logically, practically, legally, God goes to Adam first and asks him, what did he do before he goes to Eve? Mm-hmm. Adam's role was to protect the sovereignty and sanctity.
And he was given that command.
He was given
we are given that command.
Yes. And I've heard, Eve said, whatever, all this blame. But here's the thing is the formula is God goes to man first and says, what did you do? Mm-hmm. Man, here's the fulcrum. Everyone listening, here's the fulcrum. Every day we get to listen, wake up. And whether you believe in God or not, this is about responsibility. This is about acknowledging your and our roles of what we create in this world. God says, what did you do? And Adam, instead of saying, hey, I blew it. I wasn't where I was supposed to be when I was supposed to be there, or I watched it happen. I was passive. I wasn't active. He says, the woman gave me the fruit and I did eat. So then God logically goes to the woman. So, okay, what did you do? It has anything to do with the man. Mm-hmm. This is a one-on-one squared up, like, what did you do? And the woman says, the serpent beguiled me and I did eat of the fruit. And hearing your story of, a father, and I realize there's no knock on him, but, your father that wasn't there, consistently, your stepfather. And I do acknowledge that that's not the right term. In fact, I don't even know where that origin of that term came in, because it's not proper and it's not based in love. Love is that there's no step anything. It's just, that's your father.
It's the legal term. That's all I ever chalk it up to be. Right. It's a legal term.
And you were given two fathers. You were given a biological portal into this world, mm-hmm. and a cool biological portal, it sounds like, but you were also, God waited for you to be 5 until he worked you to be ready for that father. And
yeah,
I guess I just want to acknowledge you and every male out there that is a father or is going to be a father or is thinking about being a father is, man, I just want to see us all heal so it doesn't pass on any longer, the pain to our children, the pain to our wives, and then raise up this beautiful generation that can be, man, just be with others, not worry about what others think, but just be there, present with them, look at them, listen to them, feel them, stand with them, hold them up. And I'm just really touched by your story. And there's no accidents, right? There's no accidents. You were given 4 men with this journey to steward well in this life.
And at one point, I remember right after we had the twins, I remember my pastor had came to me and he said, he had reiterated something that was said when I was rebaptized. I was baptized as a child, but I got rebaptized 2.5 years ago with my wife and my oldest son. Cool. We all got baptized on the same day. And at that time, one of the elders, after he baptized me, he pulled me out of the water and he put his hand on my shoulder and he gave me a hug and he said, son, you've just been put on the armor of God. And he's like, and I see something on you that you are meant to lead an army. And he's like, and you will be given an army. God just entrusted you with the lives of men. And I remember him saying, this is before the twins. So when he said that, I was just like, oh, wow. I mean, this is an elder of the church. This is a man who has so much spiritual wisdom and life wisdom in general. And so I remember I'm like, oh man, I mean, that's a lot of responsibility. Here I am with these boys. And I'm like, that's what he meant. My pastor came back and he said something to me a couple months back, maybe about a year back, as the twins were coming. And he said, God is entrusting you with an army. He is building you up to lead. And I remember being like, God, that's a lot of pressure. Gosh dang. Like, I'm like, to lead an army, why am I the one that, But the more that I trust in that, the more I pray on becoming whatever that is needed to be. It's not my will, it's only God's will. The only thing that I strive to be is what God's will is for me to be. And to touch on something you said, because for any men that are listening to this, I try and praise it as much as I can when I hear it, and especially when I see it. But men that are raising another man's child, God bless you. I mean, there is, because I speak personally, but I also myself, I have raised one of my sons, and he calls me dad. He knows me as dad, who's not biologically mine, but the relationship, the trust, and the chosen love. It's not a biological love. We all know what it's like to have a child that you are biologically connected to, and there's an undying love. But when you choose to love a child, when you choose to sacrifice your life for another child, they feel that, and it is reciprocated. The relationship I have with my son, who is not biologically mine, is in many ways stronger than any of my biological sons. We butt heads more, the same way that me and my stepfather did. But there is a reward greater than what is given through a biological child. And that's not to downplay anything on my biological kids, but the power of having these boys that look up to us, they subconsciously recognize what we are giving them. And more so than, biological kids will look at me like, well, that's my dad, he's supposed to do that. But when there's other boys, it could be a nephew, it can be anybody that's looking up to you, nephews, nieces. There's children all over the world right now that need leadership, and they need men. They need men that can step up and show them what love feels like. They need men to step up and show them what it is to be accountable, what integrity means. If there's one thing that's been lost in this generation that's being developed now, it's integrity. It's the importance of doing the right thing even when everybody else around you isn't doing it, or because they say it's wrong.
That's right.
And that's been so tested. It's been brutal for anybody to stand for anything they believe, especially spiritually. If you stand for anything in principle, now you'll be cast out. I mean, and if you read the Bible, all of Jesus's prophets, all of his followers, look what happened to them. They were cast out. They were shamed. They were stoned. And if you want to read the Bible, that's a good place to start, because you can parallel to a lot about what's happening right now when you stand for principle. And I think as fathers, you have to enforce that in your kids as much as anything else. Which is a hard thing because they don't see it and they don't understand yet, especially at a young age. But with my oldest son, he's finally starting to pick that up, of how important that is. And one verse that I read with him, and I'll share with you real quick, but it's in 1 John 1:8. And it says, if we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. If we claim we have not sinned, if we make him out to be a liar and his word is not in us. That every time I read that, I actually have it set on an alarm. Every morning I wake up, I read that because it means something in day-to-day life. It's accountability. the entire purpose of those verses is accountability. It's self-reflecting and knowing you're a born sinner, but you're saved only by the salvation of Jesus Christ. Right. And that love that we share with our children ought to align with the exact love that he shared for us by sending his son. And if that's not the perfect textbook, guidance to how to father, how to lead, how to love everyone that depends on you, I don't know what is.
Right. Brother, there's so much, I did this, I told everyone, may we all be sinners. I gave this talk a few years ago called Living Gray in a Black and White World, where I used to live black and white in a gray world. I used to strive and I've over time, whatever lessons, life and trauma healing, have realized that it's about living gray in a black and white world, that we're never a polarity. We're never an absolute. We're never can claim like this is the stake. I am, I've arrived, but we can walk towards one or the other. We can walk towards healing or we can walk towards pain. We can walk towards goodness or we can walk towards, whatever the opposite of goodness is, evil or whatever we want to say. But one of the things that this old rabbi said, may we all be hypocrites, for no one is the absolute what they claim.
Nope.
However, may no one claim they are the absolute, for that is the worst hypocrite of all. So it's kind of a funny Jewish way to think. May we all strive to be hypocrites. May we all strive to be better than we are, but let no man claim that he is what he strives for that is the greatest hypocrite of all.
Oh, absolutely. I know.
Good, you know?
I always say that, especially if you talk to, you talk to a lot of people of the Christian church. A lot of times, I mean, and it's not as extreme as Catholicism, like we've talked about, but the rules, the boundaries, our commandments, the principles we're supposed to live by. A lot of people like to pretend that they're doing it every day, that they're doing it right. You ain't doing it right. You weren't born into that body. That's not what you were born into. Your skin is tainted from the time you're brought into this world. And I think that's the hardest part for people, is to acknowledge that they're not perfect, or that there's no way to achieve it. The only way to achieve it is through accepting your the Lord Jesus Christ as your Savior. But even then, to some people, that's not enough.
Yeah. Well,
there's a need for that. I don't even know what you would call it. There's a need for that. I guess it would be validation that they feel that they have achieved what they need to achieve in order to be accepted by Jesus Christ. And even though that they say they don't, how many continue to try and fulfill that void?
Right. Well, here is where it comes down to men in healthy relationship with a male figure in children's lives. The reason why people, from my perspective and what I help men heal with, that all we want, every single person, I believe this, every single person on planet Earth, every human being that breathes the same air just wants to be loved and known. That's it. They just want to be loved and known. Even the most vitriolic human, viscerally like evil person, that person at the end somewhere is seeking that being loved and known with wherever they're finding it. The gang member finds being loved and
typically
known.
Typically they need it the most.
Yes,
that's exactly what they're lacking.
Exactly right. However, and this is funny because you're saying that even with that understanding of the love of God, they won't, or the right and doing the right things, but they're still continuing to do the right things, even though they've accepted this narrative of love, God's love, is that they equate love from doing still. They equate like, well, just tell me what I'm supposed to do and I'll do it because I want to be loved more than anything. And the irony is, no, love precedes you doing anything. Mm-hmm. And that is when it's like the lifeguard will not save a drowning victim in the water until the person gives up, because if the lifeguard grabs the drowning person and they're flailing their arms, they'll grab the lifeguard and they'll both drown. Mm-hmm. And it's love. God's love waits for humanity to say, yeah, cool, you've done it all. Yeah, cool, you've checked all the boxes. Yeah, cool. And you could be the wealthiest, smartest, most intelligent, effective, you could be the greatest hunter, you could be the greatest philosopher, you could be the greatest whatever, and
still a void.
Yeah. Still a void. And that's why I was talking to someone. It's God so loved the world. And love in Hebrew means the Hebrew word for love in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, is ahava, which means to give. Mm-hmm. So love, when does love not give? It always gives. Giving always gives. The minute it ceases to give, it's not love. So love has always loved us. God has always loved us. And until we can surrender that we are loved, people, and especially males, will keep trying to strive and build the next generation of children to get the love from the striver and create strivees. And those strivees want to get the love from the striver, and then they become strivers themselves and they create more strivees.
It's centrifugal, huh?
Yes, exactly right.
On both ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
It totally feeds itself. It's a never ending cycle.
Never ending.
And it's just like we talked about before we started this is when do you break the cycle? And I've always said, and I've witnessed, I won't name like the people in my life, but I've noticed people in my life who have come from less. They've come from homes where there wasn't that love, but they also love twice as much because they know what that lack is like. So for me, I've always questioned, if you know what that lacking feels like, if you've personally encountered it, why do you not employ it now? Why, if you have children, if you have people that look up to you, why do you not have a passion to change that and to fill that void on such an extravagant level that someone never even has to question what that feels like?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you said, it goes back to, though, who are you trying to please?
That's exactly right.
Who are you doing it for? What's your intent?
That's right. That's right. Because we come into this world by ourselves, even though we're held by, usually parents, and we're going out this world by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're not holding the hands of our wives. We're not holding the hands of our children. Our hands are attached to this body. We're going out the way we came in, and that's by ourselves to give account for what we did. And I think for most men and women, but specifically just staying with men, I think they just need to be given the permission to heal, and in a safe space. That's why I lead men's retreats and summits. Is guys just come real butt kicking military veterans to, accountants or wherever, just the normal guy, but getting away. And me, I'm a big guy. I'm almost 6'4", 235, 240. Like, I'm a big guy. And when I can stand there in front of them and take my mask off and talk about the things I've gone through and what it takes to heal as a man and to face and get that trauma out, they're like, wait, at first, like, wait, what? Because it's so foreign. And what this world says is stuff it in, suck it up, tough it out, be harder. Well, that is the antithesis to healing, which is the antithesis to generational healing. Because and I talk about this on the podcast, you see the bull runs in Spain, or the bullfights, they keep rings in those bulls' nose, because it doesn't matter how big and strong and powerful that animal is. If you put your finger in that ring, you could bring that bull literally to its knees in its height of anger, because it's so sensitive right here. And it's like these big men that have worked on the physical, have worked on sucking it up, but they still have a great weakness that can make them crash at any moment. And for me, I have 3 kids. I have a daughter, son, and daughter. And it is literally a miracle for me and for my oldest daughter that I was given a girl, not a boy at first, because I couldn't bathe my kid. I couldn't even be around my kids for the first 5 years of all 3 of their lives. They were born. I had 3 kids. I could never even be around them if they're in the bathroom, I could barely change a diaper. I was struggling so badly. And, but as they got older, that the anger that rose in me wasn't anger at them. It was matching or mirroring the anger that I saw in the action. This is how weird and psychological things are, or generational curses, what do you want to call it. The anger that arose in me was what I witnessed as the perceived way to be to a child of my age then. So my children are representing me, and I am representing the anger that was given to me. And I didn't want to be angry at them. I didn't want to hurt them, but I was so angry at the things that happened to me. It was really just a war to fight, to like not be violent, not be terrible. And I really had to go in and heal. And one of the things that I learned, talk about this in my podcast or my TED Talk, the 3 steps to healing, I believe, for anything, to break the cycle of any trauma, any pain, anything, is a 3. And it just happens to be 3 things. If it was 5, if it was 20, I would say these, but it happens to be 3. Is you got to face the pain. You have to look at it in the eye. You got to go into the darkness. You got to stare at it and turn around in your mind's eye, whatever it is, and look at those moments you were hurt the worst. And then you got to speak the pain. You got to, in a safe space, not you, us as men specifically, scream our guts, like, just get it out. All that anger, all that repressed rage and anger when we couldn't speak, when we wanted to speak, when we couldn't, just be quiet, suck it up and get that out. And then 3rd step, release the pain. And I mean, doing all this in a safe environment away from your family, but being around men to release that pain. And I thought about this the other day. I was telling my wife, this is the model. Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane knowing full well what's going to happen. and he faces it head on. He knows what's going to happen. And he faces the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And then he speaks the pain and asks God, may it pass from me. And he's sweating blood. You know, he's hardcore. He's facing it.
Mm-hmm.
He speaks it. Let it pass from me if it's possible. And then he releases it. Not my will, but your will be done. That's that step of facing, speaking, and releasing. And it's been quite a journey for me. And I don't know, I'm sharing this. I don't know where I'm going. Just sharing as two fathers dealing with stuff and raising kids and, you know, raising sons that I've really had to work. My son I told my wife today, he calls me daddy. And I get choked up right now. Like, man, I'm a daddy. I'm not a dad. I'm a daddy. I'm like, man, that's a sweet gift that I got. And it doesn't
It's
mean
an
for
honorable
everyone.
title. Yeah.
Honorable, man. Honorable. And I grew up where pain was the mark of valor, where inflicting pain. I remember I had a grandfather. He never let me hug him. He would just hurt me. As a little kid, he would squeeze the softener in my hand and squeeze it as hard as I could till I'd cry and tell me to tough it out. I'm like, what the fudge? Like,
That's the emphasis of that generation, though. I saw someone today that said that it was like the World War II generation was just like, it'll quit bleeding at some point, and then you had the Boomer generation that was like, you'll get over it. Like, that's literally what you're nailing it on the head. That's exactly what the mentality was for men.
Yeah. And then look at the world we're in right now.
And you think about it at one point, though, you know, coming from the Great Depression, those generations, they were forced to, that was their method of survival, was to quit feeling pain, to be tough, but it never ended. And it transitioned. And like you said, it's generational. It passed on and passed on, where pain was no longer, I mean, pain's always existent, but I mean, back then you're talking about it at such an extreme level. It was the only way that men could provide and still be sane. I guess maybe sane is what you want to call it.
Right.
But it did. It transitioned and it was passed down. But what you're saying, your testament is exactly to the power of vulnerability. That's what I try and preach when I talk with people. It's the strength in facing your demon face to face and gritting your teeth back, saying, nope.
Yes, that's right.
Not anymore.
That's right.
But actually saying it, because a lot of people will face their demons and then they'll go toe to toe and then they just keep backing down. Like, I'm comfortable knowing what I know, but I don't. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable when you have to face a demon like that. It is terrifying. And I can say that because firsthand, when I came to Christ, that's what I dealt with. As I looked at myself, and what I think I saw that night when I was saved was myself. I saw the demon that had possessed me, the evil that was in my soul, the evil that had consumed me. And it was absolutely terrifying because you don't feel like you have control. But the thing is that you have to have the confidence in knowing that you do. Yeah. And that if you don't take control, you'll never have control. And the one part that you can't teach someone is to value those that count on you. And the beauty of children is just that. It's like when you talk about the honorable role of daddy. I mean, dude, there is nothing more fulfilling than seeing your sons look up to you, just to watch you. I mean, just even watching you. You'll be out mowing the yard and they'll just be watching like, oh, what's he doing?
Yeah.
But it's the same with it, you know, that's how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be, you know, lead by actions. I am far from a perfect father. I raise my voice. I get angry. I get impatient. But I always make it a priority to reinforce with love. If I snap and I raise my voice, or I get rude, or, you know, whatever, I always let myself face my problem, take accountability for it. And then I go back, and I'm not obviously going to go tell them like, you know, daddy was wrong, but I go up and I say, hey, I love you. I snapped on you because I love you and because I care and I handled it. And I know next time, just understand this is what happens. Yeah. But that's the key piece, because we're never going to be perfect men. We're going to get angry. We're going to get short, you know, we're going to get short on patience. Yeah. And there's so many other, variables, you know, that get added into our lives as leaders of a family.
Right.
So it's just important to always like reinforce on that fact that you can't make them responsible for your pain, because that is exactly the root of more of the problems that you're talking about, is making a kid feel like they are responsible for your anger. That's or, they don't know what to do with that. They don't know what to do. It's like you said, as children, we read emotion. We read not necessarily physical action, but the emotion and intent behind it.
Energy. Yes.
Yep.
100%. Yeah. I would tell, I feel like up until I really faced, the darkest stuff. So I'm 38. It wasn't until, so in 34 years old, I started going to a therapist every single week for 2 years straight, sometimes twice a week. And then 36 years old, I went to an emotional intelligence training where really I had, for me, a born again experience where I shared things that I had never shared before to anyone out of my mouth. I had never uttered some of the stuff, and it was a safe place and people loved me through it. And when I said it, I was like I could breathe. And I mean, it was just incredibly powerful. But
So you were in front of other people having
in
to
front
say
of
it though.
75 people. I didn't,
Oh my gosh.
my wife and I think I've shared this in the podcast. I was talking to my wife about it last night. I was going to kill myself if it didn't work, because I had read the Bible 7 times cover to cover. I had fasted every single Monday from Sunday night to Tuesday morning for 5 years straight. I had read every Christian classic book. I had preached. I'd done all the things. I'd striven so hard for holiness, finally to get to this place where, read it. I could give a sermon about the love of God, but I didn't know the love of God. I knew grit it out, suck it up, grind it, keep going. I knew that, but that only got me so far. And so I went down to this place, and when I was 20, I attempted suicide, and then I've always been suicidal, especially when I had when I had my children. I couldn't bathe them, and I was struggling, like, what's wrong with me? Something like, I thought I was inherently broken. Like, my mind didn't work the way everyone else's worked. I don't mean like I'm broken. I mean, no one knows. If you knew like how broken I am, no one would want to be around me. I didn't want to be around me, quite frankly. And I went to this thing, and if it didn't change, I wasn't going to come home. So I went down hard, and this program had they had no idea what was about to hit them, and I went hard. So I didn't care anymore. And my buddy, the Navy SEAL, was the one. He called me one night crying, and I'm like, "What the heck? Like, who are you?" And he tells me about this thing, and so I went, and I had a very similar experience, very powerful. But why I'm bringing all that up is facing it, and I think it comes to a point where you cannot care what any other person thinks of us any longer. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you approve of what I say or not. It doesn't matter if I approve of you. It does not matter. As men, we got to come to the place that if I don't heal and I don't get free, if I don't break free these chains and this bondage and this cloud and this tar and this slime and this never-ending wrestling, we have to break free of that, or the solution is that suicide is the highest it's ever been in men. It's 80% of all 79% of all suicides in the United States are men. It's probably higher right now with all this stuff. I remember being a kid and thinking I will hang myself in my bedroom, and I know that the children's suicide is higher right now with this quarantine and lockdown, and the news isn't covering it. People don't want to talk about the real things that would, break this nation down to its knees, and grieving and repentance and humbling ourselves of what is happening. And I share all that to say, as you share your story, as I share my story, we're being permission for other men and other women and other people listening to share their stories. And I'm honored to have you on, man. And I'm honored to call you a brother and walk with you. And I just, man, I feel emotional. This is a episode. I feel like I hang up and see you. I might cry afterwards. But I'm just thankful to hear your story. And I would say to you that what I've learned is, it's okay to tell your kids that you messed up, because no one's perfect, and we are not perfect, and they need to know that we're not perfect. And that's one of the things I wish I would have gotten, not that I need it anymore, but just to be told, hey, I'm sorry, I really screwed up. And And not that I'm telling you to do that, but just
Yeah.
it's nothing
That's a
wrong.
it's a good
There's nothing
encouragement.
wrong with telling our kids, hey, I effing blew it. Like, I am not a perfect person, but I'm working towards healing, and I love you. And, you know, you work towards healing. And however that needs to be said. But I love you, brother. And I love the story that you shared. And I just,
dude, it truly is what an extension of an absolute blessing, you know, for sure, brother. And then the power of getting to chat with you. And I mean, gosh dang, man, you guys are you are a gift. You're gifted as leaders. You're gifted as men that live profoundly through the love of Christ, and you exemplified it in extraordinary ways. And not everyone's built to do it in such an, you know, extreme capacity that you do, because what you just said, being able to come out in front of seven, you would have never caught me doing that. What I did was in the solidarity of my own place by myself. Ask me to do that in front of a crowd of people, I don't know that I ever would have done it. So therefore, I don't know that I ever would have been saved. I don't know that I ever would have been cleansed. There ever would have been a revival in me. But that speaks profoundly about the character that you hold and what your purpose is. That was exactly, if I would say that's pretty indicative of what Christ has delivered you to be. And to listen to you speak, how educated you are, how passionate you are, but how compelled you are to build community, which is what I love. That's what been the best part about this, is that our passion really is to create a greater generation of men.
Yeah.
Not just our children, but our generation.
That's right.
Now, like it is never too late to turn around, take accountability, and start being the light that people need.
That's right.
And I started using that hashtag on social media, and I need to use it more, but being the light, just be the light. It's one thing when I go back to talking about my dad, is he used to say, son, sometimes it isn't $5. Sometimes it's a smile. Your smile to someone that's sitting on the corner, you're smiling at the coffee shop, you know, whatever it is, you saying, hey, you know, have a wonderful day. That small instance is exactly what could save somebody's life.
Yes.
Because someone could be on the ropes, and that could be the one little glimmering, you know, piece of hope that someone's like, there is a good person in this world that, you know, that's willing to look out for me. And what we talked about is centrifugal. That is everlasting. It gets passed on from one person to another. And even if it doesn't, you're spreading that light, and you're trying to plant as many seeds as you can along the way. And that's all we can do.
That's right. That's right. That's all. And and if that's all we can do, that is the greatest thing we can do, because how awesome, you know?
Yeah.
Love people. And brother, I'm so honored to have you on. And how can people find you? I love, we didn't even, you know, let it be a surprise when they go to your Instagram. We didn't get into like what you're doing on Instagram, which is amazing. And that's how you and my bro connected. But how can people find you and follow you and connect with you?
So I really only frequent Instagram anymore. I try, everything's gotten so political now, and I really try and just stick to like what we said. The goal is to just build community. So you can find me on Instagram at rev.armstrong. I mean, that's really the only, I don't do much Facebook. I don't have a Twitter account. I don't do much of that stuff, but I like photography. I like doing videography, and I like having conversations with good men like yourself. So that's where you're going to find me doing my thing.
I love it, man. Well, I'll make sure to put your Instagram handle or the link in the show notes. And I'm honored to have you on, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again for sure.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Wow, brother. Thank you so much for joining. Everyone, I hope you are blessed. I declare the blessing of love on you all. Blessings and blessings of love. When you bless someone with love, you have stood in the highest authority, the highest power that is rightfully yours when you allow love inside yourself. Therefore, you can give love outside yourself. My name is Lucas Mack. This is the Golden Rule Revolution, where inspiration and purpose come from treating people like people and nothing less. I look forward to talking with you on the next episode.